Hi guys, Mr. Wiz here. We are now on lesson 3, which means that we are ready to build our first game. But before we do that, we still have a little bit more to learn. So in lesson 1, I taught you all about using the art tools to create sprites and to create background. In lesson 2, I taught you about variables, how to create those, how to use those. Today, we are going to be building a clicker game. And in order to do that, we're going to have to learn a little bit about events, specifically button events, but we'll talk more about that in a second. So if you're not familiar, if you haven't heard the term clicker game before, the basic idea of a clicker game is they are simple games where you get points by pressing buttons. These are games that can be a little bit fun and addictive for all age groups, from young to old. Everybody seems to enjoy clicker games because they don't require a lot of skill, they don't require a lot of thought or strategy. They're just time killers, you know? So we press buttons, we get points, we have fun while we're doing it. So we're going to be doing that today, and I'm going to show you how in just a few moments. So the first thing that you need to do, as always, is to make sure that you are signed in. So check that top right corner and make sure that you see your initials or your picture up there. If it says sign in, then make sure you go ahead and sign in so your work gets saved. We're going to start our first project now by clicking on the orange button that says New Project. And for now, I'm just going to call it Clicker Game. We can always rename it later. Once we have built our game and we've decided what the theme is going to be, we can change the name at a later point. Are you excited to build your first game? I am. Let's do this. This is when coding starts getting fun. All right, so first things first, to build a clicker game, we need there to be points. Now, normally, if we were building this game from nothing, if we didn't have all the helpful tools that MakeCode had, we would have to create a variable at this point and call it a points or score or something like that. But MakeCode actually makes game building a little bit easier because they have a few pre-made variables, and points is one of them. So if you go to the info section over here in the toolbox and you click on info, I want you to notice they have a couple pre-made variables that you can use when you're building games. These are very handy because they're the things that you use most frequently when game building. So one of the pre-made variables they have is score. Down below that, they have life, and they also have countdown. So we use these a lot in our game building, and we're going to go ahead and get started by grabbing the set score to 0 block. I want you to notice, before I put it in my code, that there's two different ones here. There's set score to 0, and there's change score by 1. We talked about this when we were building variables in the last lesson, but just to cover it again, set score sets the score to the number we give it. So if there's already a variable there, it would replace that. Change adds or subtracts. So we're going to start by putting in our onStart block, set score to 0, because when the game starts, the player is going to have 0 points at the very beginning of the game. They have to earn those points, right? Now, when do we want the player to earn points? Think about it. If it's a clicking game, when should the player earn points? Probably when they're clicking on something, right? So we're going to go to the controller section. And in the controller section, we've been here once before because we used the move sprite with buttons block. But this time we're going to look at this other one here that says on a button press. We're going to grab that and put this in our code. It doesn't matter where you put it. It does not have to be connected to the onStart. It is a separate event. So that's the key word of the day, events. So what are events? In simple terms, an event is an action that is occurring that triggers a response from our computer. So in the case of this on a button press block, this is an event that says when the A button gets pressed, do something. Now, what is it going to do? It's going to do whatever we put inside of this block. In fact, you've already been using an event block because the onStart block is also an event block. It occurs when the program starts. So anything that we want to happen at the beginning of the program, at the program's start, we would put in the onStart block. Anything that we want to happen when the button's pressed, we're going to put inside the button press block. So in this case, we want points to be earned when the button is pressed. So we're going to go back to info. We're going to go back to the score section, and we're going to use, well, here, just to show you what I was talking about earlier, let's put set score. This is the wrong block to use, but I want to show you what happens if we use it. If I put set score to 1 and I go to play my program, here's what happens. The first time I press the button, I'm going to get 1 point. Great. That's what we want it to do, right? But then I press the button again and I still only have 1 point. The reason for this is because every time I press the button, it is resetting the score to 1. That's what the set score block does, is it resets the score. I don't want that. So as I mentioned earlier, the block we actually need is change score by 1. So now, if I press the A button on my simulator, every time I press it, the number should go up. If you can't see that very well, let me make it larger for you and move my head out of the way here. So if I press the A button, the number goes up. Right now it says 8, now it's 9, 10, 11, 12, so on and so forth. And I'm doing this by clicking on the A button on the simulator, but I can also do it by pressing spacebar on my keypad. So spacebar will work, or the A button press. And there's actually lots of buttons that will work. If you ever need a reminder on what the keypad controls are, underneath the simulator, there is a button here that looks like a keyboard. If you click on it, it will show you the different buttons that you can use for MakeCode. So the A button press can be done with either Z or space. Z or space is what it says here. So let's go ahead and try that again. Now that I know that, I'm going to click on the keypad again to get rid of it. And I can do spacebar or the letter Z on my keyboard, and they both give me points. So yeah, we just created a point system that works when you click the A button. Pretty straightforward. Not quite a game yet, but pretty straightforward. All right, so I'm going to shrink this back down. To make this feel more like a game, we need some sort of challenge. We need some sort of goal, right? So let's give it a countdown. Let's give it a timer so that the goal is now not just to get points, but to get as many points as you can within a certain time limit. Going back to info, if we scroll down past the score stuff and past the life, we have a section here that says countdown. So we're going to give it a countdown, start countdown, and I'm going to put the start countdown in the on start. So it happens as soon as the game begins, the timer starts. Oh, and there's my simulator. You can tell it already started. If I hit reset, it starts back right away. So now I have a goal, which is to click as many times as I can within those 10 seconds. I'm not going to get a very high score this time, but there we go. After the 10 seconds is over, it says game over, and it gives me my score. So right now, the game is designed to end automatically when the countdown runs out, and that seems to be working pretty good. So we have a clicker game. We have the beginning of a clicker game here. I can restart it. I can try to beat my high score. I'm going to use the spacebar this time instead of clicking, because it tends to work better for me. I can click pretty fast with the spacebar. And yep, I got a new high score. There it is. Score is 81. Great. So we have the beginning of a clicker game. How can we make it better? Well, now I would say would be a great time to use some of the art skills that we used in lesson 1. So here's what I want you to do. I want you in just a moment to pause this video, and I want you to create a background and create a sprite that you would like to use in your clicker game. Think about a theme that you think might be fun, and then go ahead and create a background and a sprite for your clicker game. I'm going to go ahead and pause my side while you pause your end, and I'm going to build something as well. Okay, I'm back. So I decided for my clicker game that I'm going to make a game where a man is attacking a monster or a dragon of some sort to protect the castle. So I grabbed these pictures straight from the gallery. I used for my background image this picture of a castle, and then I used 2 sprites instead of 1. I grabbed this dinosaur-looking guy. Looks kind of like Godzilla. He's very tall. And then I grabbed this dude with the sword. So I'm going to use 2 sprites for my game, and that's absolutely fine. You can use more than 1 sprite in your game. It's completely up to you. Now, since I have multiple sprites, just to keep it organized a little bit better, I'm going to name them. So this dude with the sword, I'm going to rename him as Swordsman. And I'm going to rename this dinosaur, rename variable as Dino. All right, so now I've got my 2 characters that are in the game, and I've got my background picture. But if I look at my image, they don't really look that great because he's right on top of him. It doesn't make sense for the game for him to be there. It would make more sense for him to be down on the floor, right? So I need to move him. So how do I do that? Well, here's something else new you're going to be learning today. If we go to the sprite section, underneath where we created our sprites, we have some blocks that allow us to make some changes to them. So here we have one that says set my sprite's position to x0, y0. So I'm going to grab this block and I'm going to put it in my code. Now, here's an important thing for you to understand. This block is going to edit the position of my swordsman. So it's very important that I put this block after I create the swordsman. And I need to also make sure that the names match. They both need to say the same name. If the names don't match, I'm going to get an error message. You may have just saw it a second ago, where before I change the name, if it said my sprite, I get this error message. It says failed cast on null. I get a little error symbol there. That error is occurring because the names don't match, because I'm telling the computer to set my sprite's position, and there is nothing in the game that is currently called my sprite. So it's important to make sure the names are always matching. The same problem would occur if I put the blocks in the wrong order. So if I put the set swordsman position block at the beginning of my code, before I create the swordsman, I'm going to get that same error. There it is, failed cast on null. So failed cast on null means I asked the computer to do something it literally can't do. You have to think of a computer in the sense of they follow instructions that you give it, but they follow the instructions exactly. So even simple instructions that you think anybody would be able to understand, a computer is not going to be able to understand those instructions if they don't make perfect sense. So in this case, it reads the code in order. So on start, the first line it reads says set swordsman position to x0, y0. The computer doesn't know what that means because it doesn't know what swordsman means, right? Think about it like you're giving someone instructions on how to build a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. If you say, for step 1, put the peanut butter on the bread. Well, what if they don't have any bread out? What if they don't have any peanut butter out? What if the bread's not on a plate yet? How are they going to put the peanut butter on the bread? Do they do it with their hands and scoop it out? Do they use a knife? These are things that the person needs to know if you're going to give them detailed instructions. Computers need to have detailed instructions or they don't know what to do. So before we can set the swordsman position, we first have to create the swordsman. So the order of the code is very, very important. So I create the swordsman first, then I can edit him. Once I create him, I can edit him here. So I need to figure out what his XY position is. Remember a while back I told you that the size of the screen is important to remember? Do you remember what the width of the screen was? What about the height? All right, so if you remember, the width of the screen for MakeCode is 160 pixels and the height is 120. That is the X and the Y. So if we're looking at the size of the screen, 160X is all the way to the right. 120Y is all the way down at the bottom. So X moves things to the right and Y moves things down. This is a little bit different than you might be used to if you've used X and Y in math class. Because in math class, Y usually goes up. But when you're doing coding, especially with JavaScript and code similar to it, Y goes down. So what we're going to do is we need to tell it how far to the right, how many pixels to the right, that's the X, and how many pixels down, that's the Y. Good news is MakeCode makes this easier for you because if you click on the number, it will actually pop up with this little box where it'll show you where you're going to be putting your sprite. So I want my sprite to be down near the dinosaur's feet, so I'm going to put him right around here. Let's see what it looks like now when it loads. Yeah, that's pretty good. You know what? I might want to move him a little further down, though, and a little further to the right. I want him attacking his leg, his foot. So if I want him to be a little bit further to the right, my X number needs to be bigger than 50. So let's try 60. So I can use that clicking tool to just kind of guess, or I can type in numbers. I want it to be a little bit farther down than 81. So let's try 90. So I'm not changing it by much. Hey, that's almost perfect. I might move him a little bit more to the left, though. I think I moved him too far to the right. So let's try maybe 55. Oh, there we go. I like that position. That's a good position for him. So now my swordsman is attacking the dinosaur's foot. This will look good. All right, so I've got my sprites. They're in the position that I want them to be in. If you haven't done that yet, go ahead and pause the video now and use the position block that I just showed you to decide where on your screen you want the sprite to go. In a second, we're going to make it so that the sprite actually changes and moves when you press the button. I'll show you that in a second. But go ahead and pause the video and decide where you want your sprite to go. All right, are you ready for the next part? So right now in my game, I've got a simple clicker game where I press the space bar and I get points and there's a countdown and everything's great, but my characters aren't doing anything. And if I want this game to be a little bit more fun, a little bit more engaging, I should have some movement. I should have some action. So what I'm going to show you today is going to be just a simple little trick we can do to animate our sprite. So here's what I'm going to do. Now keep in mind, I used an image from the gallery, so this is going to be a little bit easier for me. If you created your own image, then unfortunately you will need to create a second one. But let me show you what I have in mind. So I'm going to go to the sprite section, and I'm not going to grab the red block. This is a common mistake a lot of students make when they do this lesson, is they grab the wrong block. I'm not going to grab a red block for this, because remember, the red block creates a new sprite. I don't want to create a new sprite now. I want the picture to change on my original sprite. Remember how I told you guys a while back that sprite images are a type of variable because they allow you to change them? So that's what we're talking about. We're going to change the image. So down here, I'm in the sprite section, and I go all the way down to the bottom. There's a block here that says set my sprite's image. That's what we're changing. We're not going to create a new sprite. We're just changing the image. So I'm going to grab set my sprite's image to, and I want to put this in the A button press. So when the button is pressed, it's going to give me a point, but I also want it to change the image. Now my character is not called my sprite, so that's why I got this error message here. My character is called Swordsman. So I need to change this to Swordsman. And now I need to decide what image do I want him to change to. So right now, his sword is up in the air. I want his sword to come down like he's attacking the monster. So I'm going to change that image. So if I click on the bubble, I can go to gallery. And fortunately for me, there's already a picture like that. So here's my picture with his sword up, and here's the picture with his sword down. I'm going to go ahead and select that one. So now when I press my button, the sword comes down. The problem is it only did it once. So let me restart that for you and you'll see what I'm talking about. So it starts up, I press the button, and it comes down. But as I continue to press the button, it stays down. I want it to come down and then come back up so it can attack him over and over and over again and create a really engaging effect. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a on button release block. So I can either go to controller and grab a new one of these, or a little thing I don't think I've shown you guys yet. If you're using the same block multiple times, but you're making some edits to it or something like that, you can always duplicate. So if I use the right side of my mouse, I can click on the A button press that I have here, and I can choose to duplicate it. Duplicating creates a copy. Now I have a small problem here. When I duplicated it, you see how one got grayed out and one is not grayed out? That's normal for events. You can only have any event occur in your code one time. So I can't have two different events that both say on A button press. I can only have one that says A button press. But the good news is I actually don't want this one to say A button press. I want this one to say on A button release. Ho-ho. There we go. And now I don't want it to get another point, so I'm going to delete that block. I can either delete it by dragging it into the toolbox, but if I do that, it's going to take the whole thing with it. The easier thing for me to do is to just press delete on my keyboard. Boom. So now when the button is pressed, it's going to get a score, and it's going to change the picture to the sword down. When the button's released, it's going to set the image, and it still has the sword down. I want to actually use this original image. So that same trick I used a second ago, I'm going to use again. I'm going to duplicate. Actually, just let me do that. Let's see. If I click on, it might not let me do that. What if I go to my assets and I click on the sword up from there? Yep, that worked. So one little trick you can use in MakeCode Arcade, if you're planning on using an image that you've already used before, you can go to my assets to find all the images that you've already used. So there I changed the sword down to a sword up. So if I look at my code will start with the swordsman with the sword up. When I press the button, the sword will come down. When I release the button, the sword will come back up. So let's test it out. And once again, I want you to notice that these blue blocks are not the same as the red block. That's an important thing to understand. We're not creating new sprites. We're just changing the picture. So if I test my game now, And look at that. And I can do this really fast, and it looks like it's attacking really fast as it switches the picture back and forth from the sword down to the sword up. We have a simple animation that we just created. Congratulations. We are almost done. Actually, this is a pretty long video. I'm going to stop the video now. On the second part, we're going to improve our game a little bit more, make it a little bit more engaging. So get ready for a lesson 3, part 2, where we're going to add some sound effects, and we're going to edit the game over screen a bit, and we'll show you all about that in lesson 3, part 2. All right. If you learned something new today, please hit that like button. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. If you know anybody who you think would like to learn what you're learning in these videos, please share our page with them. I'm here to teach, and this is all free, so as many people who can get on here should be getting on here to have some fun and learn how to build fun games. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.